You're trying to make me look like the villain!
No, you did that yourself.
What happens when a walk home, meant to prove we're just friends, turns into the moment that ends everything? Why did he stay calm while I laughed it off? And how did that quiet become the thing that hit harder than shouting ever could? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I'm Liora, and I swear I didn't mean for it to go that far. It was just a walk, 2 blocks at most, and somehow that small decision cracked everything open. The party had been loud, full of lights and laughter, and when Mason, my ex, offered to walk me home, I said yes without even thinking. I told myself it was harmless, that Evan would understand because trust should mean freedom, right? That's what I kept repeating to everyone later, over and over, as if saying it enough would make it true. But now, when I look back, I can see the shift started the second I said yes. Evan's text came in while we were still walking, his name lighting up my phone like a warning I didn't want to see. I laughed it off, posted a photo, even made a joke about jealous men online. It all felt powerful until the silence started, the kind that spreads through a home like fog. I didn't realize then that quiet could be a weapon, that a calm man could undo you without ever raising his voice. That walk home didn't just end a night, it ended everything that came after. I still remember that night so clearly it almost feels cruel. The city lights were sharp against the sky, the music from the rooftop carrying down into the streets, and for once, I felt like the center of everything. We'd been invited to a launch party by one of my co-workers, something flashy, full of people who liked to talk about networking, but really just wanted to gossip and drink. I convinced Evan to come even though he hates those things. He's more of a quiet night-in type. I said it would be fun, that it mattered for my job. He'd smiled, said sure, and I took that as a win. I spent most of the afternoon getting ready. Hair, makeup, heels that were way too high, but made my legs look amazing. I wanted to look like I belonged in that crowd, not like someone's +1. Evan watched me from the couch while pretending to check his phone. He asked if I really needed to go all out for just a work thing. I said it wasn't just work, it was opportunity. He didn't answer, but I saw the look, half amused, half tired. By the time we got there, the rooftop was packed. Strings of gold lights tangled above us. A DJ in the corner, spinning tracks too loud for conversation. My co-workers waved me over, glasses already in hand. I could feel eyes on me as I stepped out of the elevator. That little rush of being noticed always hits harder than I want to admit. Evan stayed close at first, one hand on my back, polite smile in place. He always does that, tries to look like he's comfortable even when he's not. Things started fine. I introduced him around. He said all the right words, nodded in all the right places, but I could tell he was counting the minutes. I told myself it wasn't my fault he didn't know how to loosen up. Then, halfway through the night, Mason showed up. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. Same easy grin, same way of making everyone feel like they were the only person in the room. He was behind the bar helping a friend out, apparently. When he spotted me, he called my name so loudly a few heads turned. I laughed before I even thought about it. Evan looked up, confused. I said, "That's Mason. Remember I told you about him?" He nodded slowly, expression unreadable. Mason leaned over the counter and said I hadn't changed a bit. I told him he hadn't either, except maybe a few more grey hairs. He laughed, poured me a drink I didn't ask for, and told Evan he was a lucky guy. It could have stopped there. Should have. But Mason had that charm that fills every silence. He asked about my job, about life, about everything. When Evan excused himself to get some air, Mason leaned closer and said he was glad I still looked happy. I told him I was. Mostly. He smirked like he could hear the uncertainty in my voice. I didn't pull away. Why would I? It was harmless, old friends catching up. When Evan came back, Mason raised his glass and said, "Man, you've got yourself a gem." I smiled like I hadn't just been soaking up attention I shouldn't have wanted. Evan didn't respond. He just slipped his hand into mine, the kind of small gesture that felt more like a reminder than affection. I squeezed back, pretending not to notice the tension. Later, when the group moved to the dance floor, I joined them. Evan stayed behind, talking to one of his colleagues from the school. Mason was there, spinning me around like we were back in college. Someone took photos. The flashes felt like applause. I told myself it was innocent, that everyone was watching us because it was fun, not because it looked wrong. I caught Evan's eyes across the room, steady, quiet, unreadable, and suddenly, the laughter around me felt too bright. When the music slowed, I excused myself to get water. Mason followed, still joking, still too close. I told him he should check on the bar. He said it could wait. That's when he asked if I wanted him to walk me home later. Said the night air would do me good. I laughed, said Evan would probably be driving. He shrugged. Offer stands. I told him maybe. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. On the way back to our table, Evan asked if I was having fun. I said of course. He asked if Mason always acted like that. I rolled my eyes, told him not to start. He said he wasn't starting anything, just asking. I said he should trust me more. He said he did. The way he said it was calm, too calm, and I hated that. I wanted him to argue, to care enough to show it. Instead, he took a sip of water and said, "Okay." I went back to the dance floor to prove a point I didn't even understand. My friends were already teasing, saying how lucky I was to have an ex who still adored me. I laughed along, pretending it didn't mean anything. Someone shouted that Evan looked jealous. I said good. Maybe he should be. They laughed harder. I told myself I was just keeping the mood light, but part of me liked that he could hear. When the night wound down, people started calling rides. Mason found me near the coat rack and asked if I wanted that walk home. Evan was outside talking to his coworker, and for a second I thought about saying no. But then I pictured his face if he saw me with Mason and how composed he'd be about it. That's what did it. I said sure, why not? It's just a walk. The air outside was cool, the kind that feels cleaner after too many hours inside. Mason talked the whole way, about work, about how weird it was seeing me again. He said I still moved the same when I danced. I told him he remembered too much. He laughed. We stopped at a crossing, the streetlight washing everything gold. I looked down at my phone, 3 missed calls from Evan. I showed Mason and said, "See, he's already acting jealous." Mason said that just meant he cared. I shrugged, pocketed the phone and kept walking. When we reached my building, I thanked him. He said he'd had fun, that it felt like old times. I smiled and said, "Except I'm not yours anymore." He gave a half smile and said, "You sure about that?" I laughed it off, told him good night. I didn't notice Evan's car parked across the street until I turned my key. The headlights flashed once before going dark. Inside, he was already in the kitchen when I walked in. He asked if I needed help locking the door. His tone was neutral, too polite. I said I was fine. He nodded, then asked if Mason made sure I got home safe. I told him not to make it sound weird. He said he wasn't making it anything. It already was. I told him he was overreacting. He said maybe. Then he rinsed his mug and set it upside down on the counter. The next morning, I woke up to the faint hum of the printer from the other room. Evan was dressed for work, tying his shoes. I asked why he was up so early. He said he had papers to organize. I said since when did he work on weekends? He said sometimes things can't wait. I told him I didn't understand why he was acting distant over something so small. He said, "Small things show big truths." Then he left without breakfast. I tried to shake it off, spent half the morning scrolling through photos from the party. Someone had tagged me in a video of Mason spinning me under the lights. The caption read, "Still the best duo." I almost untagged myself, but then I didn't. I told myself I looked confident, like someone who couldn't be controlled. I posted it to my story with a caption about how trust means freedom. When Evan came home that night, he didn't mention it. Just set down his bag, asked if I'd eaten. I said no, I was too tired. He ordered takeout without another word. We ate in silence. I asked if we were okay. He said, "We will be." I said that sounded like a threat. He said, "It's a plan." Later, while he showered, I noticed his phone light up with a calendar reminder, downtown, 10:45 a.m. I figured it was school stuff. Still, something about the time being that exact made my stomach twist. When he came out, I asked what it was. He said, "Just something personal." I said, "Should I worry?" He smiled faintly and said, "Not yet." That night, when I couldn't sleep, I scrolled through my messages again. Mason had texted, "Glad you made it home okay. Next time, maybe I'll keep you out later." I stared at it for a while, then deleted it. I told myself deleting meant it didn't exist anymore. The next morning, Evan had already left again. His side of the bed was untouched, the blanket folded too neatly. On the kitchen counter sat 2 mugs, his spotless, mine half full of cold coffee. Beside them, a yellow sticky note read, "We'll talk when timing's right." I told myself that meant forgiveness, but deep down it felt like something else. I called Tara later, told her Evan was being dramatic. She laughed and said men just like to sulk when they lose control. I agreed, pretending it was all funny. I even laughed when she said the video was going around our office chat. I said good, let them talk. Let them see I still had charm. But when I hung up, the apartment felt hollow. The silence grew over the next few days. Quiet mornings, polite questions, no warmth. Evan started closing his laptop whenever I walked into the room. Once I caught a glimpse of an open folder labeled Household. He said it was for budgeting. I believed him because I wanted to. I told myself every relationship goes through rough patches. I told myself he just needed time. But the truth is, every word I said that week sounded like I was talking to someone else, someone trying to convince a mirror. The last thing I remember before everything began to shift for real was the way he looked at me one morning when I said, "You know I'd never hurt you." He didn't answer, didn't even nod. He just looked at me like he was memorizing a moment before it disappeared. Then he said softly, "I know what you'd never admit." And he walked out the door. That night I heard the printer again. A soft click, a hum, the faint smell of toner. I told myself he was just organizing school papers, but when I passed the guest room, I saw the edge of a folder labeled Archive A. The letters were neat, deliberate. I shut the door quietly and told myself it didn't mean anything. I still believed I could talk my way out of anything. I just didn't realize the talking part was already over. The next week started like nothing had happened. At least that's what I told myself. Evan still woke up early, still made his quiet coffee, still left his mug turned upside down on the counter before heading out. I took that as proof that we were fine, that he was just moody. But the silence between us had grown legs. It followed me everywhere. Even when the apartment wasn't empty, it felt like it was. On Monday morning, I met Tara for coffee near the office. She'd seen the video again and said I looked effortlessly magnetic. She told me not to feel guilty for being admired. "Jealousy's a compliment in disguise," she said, stirring her latte, like she was talking about weather, not my relationship. I wanted to believe her. I said Evan just didn't understand how harmless it was, how normal it is to have male friends. She raised an eyebrow and said, "Especially when they're exes." I laughed too loudly, said we were adults. She shrugged, told me adults still get divorced. I brushed it off. I wasn't about to let anyone make me feel guilty for being friendly. But later that day, when I checked my phone, there was a message from Mason. "You disappeared. Still up for that walk again sometime?" I stared at it too long. Then I typed back maybe, hit send, and felt the smallest jolt of something I didn't want to name. When I got home, Evan was in the living room, laptop open, light from the screen on his face. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Budgeting." His voice was so neutral it almost didn't sound like him. I told him he worked too much, that he should relax. He said, "I am relaxing." I laughed, said, "No one relaxes with spreadsheets." He looked up then and said, "Some people relax by making sense of things." I didn't like that answer. It felt like he was talking about something else. I tried to change the subject, asked if he wanted to go out for dinner. He said he already ate. That annoyed me more than it should have. I asked when he planned on letting this go. He said, "What exactly?" I said, "You know what." He said, "Then you already have your answer." The way he stayed calm drove me crazy. It made me feel like I was the only one holding the mess. I wanted him to yell, to act human. I wanted some sign that he cared, but he just turned back to his screen. That night, I texted Mason again, just to prove something to myself. The conversation was light at first. Memes, old jokes, the kind of chatter that feels safe until it isn't. Then he asked how things were with Evan. I said, "He's being dramatic." Mason replied, "Still can't handle competition, huh?" I didn't respond right away. I just stared at those words, wondering if I liked how they made me feel. Tuesday, Evan came home later than usual. He didn't say where he'd been. His shirt smelled faintly of toner, like the printer again. I asked if he was working late. He said, "Personal stuff." I said, "You don't keep secrets from me, do you?" He smiled a little. "We all keep something." I didn't like that either. I went to bed early, hoping he'd follow. He didn't. Sometime around midnight, I woke to the faint click of a drawer in the guest room. I got up quietly, peeked through the crack in the door, and saw him sitting at the desk. There were papers everywhere, neatly stacked. He picked one up, read it, placed it in a folder labeled Utilities. Another said Insurance. I almost asked what he was doing, but something about his focus stopped me. By Wednesday, I was tired of the tension. I decided to confront it directly. When he got home, I told him we needed to talk. He said, "About what?" I said, "About you freezing me out." He said he wasn't freezing me out. I said it felt like he was living somewhere else in his head. He said, "Maybe I am." I asked if this was about Mason. He said, "What do you think?" I said he was paranoid. He said, "Maybe I'm prepared." I rolled my eyes. Prepared for what? A ghost? He didn't answer. I thought that would end it, but he stood up, took a pen, and started writing something in a small notebook. I asked what that was. He said, "Notes." I laughed. "About what? My crimes?" He looked at me for a long moment and said, "About reality." Then he closed the notebook, slid it into his pocket, and walked away. Thursday night, Mason called. I shouldn't have answered, but I did. He asked if things were still tense at home. I said yes. He said maybe I needed a reminder that I was still desirable. I told him he was ridiculous. He laughed, said he'd be near my office Friday, and maybe we could grab lunch. I hesitated, then said, "Sure, just as friends." Friday morning, Evan was already gone when I woke up. His side of the bed was smooth, like no one had slept there. I checked my phone. Nothing from him, no good morning text like he used to send. Just a missed call from an unknown number around 7:30 a.m. I met Mason at noon. We sat outside a cafe, and the sun was bright enough to make everything look cleaner than it was. He joked, complimented, leaned closer than necessary. I laughed because that's what I do when I don't know what else to do. At one point he said, "You know, you light up when you're away from him." I told him not to start. He said he was just being honest. I said honesty wasn't always a virtue. He smirked. Guess that depends on who's listening. When I got back to the office, there was a text from Evan. "Dinner at 7. I stared at it for a full minute before replying, "Sure." I wanted to believe it was a peace offering. That evening, the apartment smelled like takeout when I walked in. He'd set the table, even lit a candle. For a second, I thought maybe this was the start of forgiveness. I said it was nice. He said, "Sometimes nice is just quiet." I sat down anyway. We ate mostly in silence. He asked about my day. I told him about a project. He listened, nodded. Then, out of nowhere, he asked if I'd seen Mason recently. I froze. Then I laughed like it was the funniest thing he could have asked. "Wow, you really are keeping score." He said, "Just asking." I said, "Yes, we had lunch, but it was nothing." He said, "Nothing usually means something to you." I snapped, "Why are you acting like a detective?" He said, "Because someone has to collect the truth." That sentence hung in the air. I pushed my plate away, said I was done eating. He said, "I know." I asked what that was supposed to mean. He said, "You're always done when you're caught." I told him he was twisting everything. He said, "No, I'm straightening it." I stormed off to the bedroom, half expecting him to follow. He didn't. I could hear him moving around in the living room, drawers sliding, papers rustling, then a low mechanical hum. I walked out quietly and saw the printer light blinking again. I asked what he was printing this time. He said, "Records." I said, "Of what?" He said, "Just things I might forget." I told him he was being obsessive. He said, "Memory is cheaper than therapy." Saturday morning, I decided to stay at my sister June's for a bit. I told Evan I needed space. He said, "Take as much as you need." That calm voice again, the one that made me feel small. June asked what happened, and I told her Evan was acting distant. She said maybe he was tired of being embarrassed. I told her she was taking his side. She said she was taking reality's side. At her apartment, I scrolled through my messages again. Mason had sent another text. "You looked tense at lunch. Wish I could help you relax." I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. When I came home Sunday evening, Evan was in the kitchen with a mug of tea, reading something on his phone. He said, "Good weekend?" I said, "Fine." He nodded, didn't look up. I walked to our bedroom and saw one of my dresses folded on the bed, the one from the party. There was a faint smell of detergent, like he'd washed it himself. I called out, "Why did you clean this?" He said, "Didn't want it mixed with the rest." I laughed. "Oh, so now you're sorting laundry by sin?" He didn't answer. Later that night, I tried again to talk. I said, "Can we please stop pretending everything's normal?" He said, "We stopped pretending weeks ago." I said, "Then what are we doing?" He looked at me, steady and quiet. "Finishing what's left." I hated that sentence more than anything he'd ever said. I told him he was cruel, that he was punishing me for being confident. He said, "Confidence isn't cruelty until it hurts someone else." I said he was just bitter. He said, "Maybe, but bitterness keeps people honest." He went to bed early, left me sitting in the living room staring at the candle from our dinner, now cold wax. I picked up his notebook from the table. The pages were filled with dates, short notes in neat handwriting. Party, rooftop, Mason, walk, lunch, cafe, shared account, pending update. I slammed it shut, my chest tight. When he came out of the room, he saw it in my hands. He didn't look angry, just tired. I said, "You're seriously documenting me now?" He said, "I'm documenting us." I said, "That's insane." He said, "It's preparation." I didn't respond. I went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Every sound in the apartment felt sharp. Around midnight, I heard his phone vibrate. A faint ping. I looked at the screen lighting the dark room. A calendar reminder. Paper drop. 11 aux a.m. I whispered his name, but he didn't move. Just kept breathing slow and steady, like someone who already knew what morning would bring. When dawn came, he was gone again. The coffee pot was still warm, the printer tray empty, the mug clean. On the counter was another sticky note, smaller this time. It said, "Don't worry, everything's being handled properly." I told myself that meant progress. But even as I said it out loud, I felt something in my chest twist, like I'd already fallen out of my own story. Monday morning started too bright, like the world had forgotten how heavy everything felt inside the apartment. I got up before Evan for once, or maybe he'd already been gone. His side of the bed was cold, sheet smooth, pillow untouched. The printer light blinked faintly in the guest room. I closed the door without looking in. I didn't want to know what he was doing anymore. At work, the office buzzed about the weekend. Tara waved me over, phone in hand. She said I was trending again in the local story thread because someone posted another clip from the rooftop party. In this one, Mason and I were laughing outside the building, the city lights behind us. It looked like something from a movie. Two people too close, smiling too much. Tara said it was adorable. I forced a laugh. My stomach flipped when I saw Evan's username had been tagged in the comments. I texted him right away. "Ignore the video. People have no life." He didn't respond. A half hour later, I checked again. His account had quietly untagged itself from the post. I told myself he was just embarrassed by the gossip, not by me. But when lunch rolled around, my manager called me into her office. She said she'd seen the clip and maybe I should tone down my personal visibility online because it could reflect on the company. I smiled politely, said of course, and walked out, feeling humiliated. My coworkers stopped talking when I passed their desks. I could feel them judging, whispering. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I left early, claiming a migraine. On the way home, I scrolled through my notifications. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. People loved the photo. Strangers were debating whether the man in it was my boyfriend or someone more fun. I wanted to delete it, but a part of me couldn't. Every like was proof that I still mattered. When I got home, the apartment was spotless. Evan's shoes lined neatly by the door, the kitchen counter gleaming. There was something eerie about the order of it all. I dropped my bag, kicked off my heels, and called his name. No answer. The silence pressed against me. On the fridge, a note was stuck beneath a magnet shaped like a lighthouse. Dinner in the fridge. Don't wait up. I opened the container. It was pasta, his kind of comfort food, but cold. I ate a few bites standing at the counter, staring at his handwriting. The loops were so neat, so calm. I wanted to crumple it up. Later, I called Tara again and told her Evan was being distant. She said he was on his quiet revenge arc. I asked what that meant. She said when men stop arguing, they're planning. I laughed, said Evan wasn't like that. She said, "Maybe you just don't know him as well as you think." That night, I heard him come home after midnight. The door clicked softly. He moved through the apartment without turning on lights. I pretended to be asleep when he entered the bedroom, though my heart was racing. He paused near the dresser, maybe looking at me, maybe not. Then the sound of a zipper, something being packed or checked, and the faint scrape of paper. I waited for him to climb into bed, but he went to the guest room instead. In the morning, I checked his side again. Empty. A single USB drive rested on the nightstand, labeled only with the date in black marker. I didn't touch it. By Wednesday, I'd convinced myself everything was fine. People fight, they cool off. It's normal. I even bought a small gift, a new tie, navy blue, the kind he always said made him look too formal. I wanted to give it to him as a peace offering. But when I got home, he wasn't there. Instead, the living room lights were on, his laptop open on the coffee table. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. A spreadsheet filled the screen. The first column listed dates, the second short notes, party, rooftop, walk, Mason, lunch, cafe, post, public, video, viral, tag, removed. My throat tightened. There was another tab open. Household and account changes pending transfer. I snapped the laptop shut just as I heard his key in the lock. He came in, calm as ever, carrying a small grocery bag. I said, "Are you keeping tabs on me now?" He blinked. "You looked at my computer?" I said, "Don't turn this around. Why are you writing about me?" He shrugged slightly. "Because memory lies." I told him he was being creepy. He said, "You call everything creepy when it stops working in your favor." I threw the tie onto the counter. "You're unbelievable." He looked at it, then back at me. "Nice color. A little late for gifts, though." We didn't speak the rest of the night. The next day at work, Tara cornered me again. She said Evan had untagged himself from every old post on my page, even our anniversary photos. She thought it was hilarious. "He's doing that quiet protest thing," she said. I laughed it off, but I felt my stomach twist. During lunch, Mason sent another message. "He giving you grief again? You deserve better, you know." I typed, "It's complicated," then deleted it before hitting send. When I got home that evening, I found Evan sitting at the kitchen table with a small pile of mail and a pen. He was going through envelopes, marking them neatly with sticky notes: utilities, bank, insurance. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Organizing." I said, "You already did that." He said, "Still a few gaps." I leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "So this is your new hobby? Sorting our lives into folders?" He looked up, eyes steady. "It's better than letting someone else mess up the order." I rolled my eyes, muttered that he was turning into my father. He said, "Maybe your father understood boundaries." That one hit deep. I told him he didn't get to psychoanalyze me. He said, "I don't have to. You narrate your own story loud enough for everyone else." I went to the bedroom, slammed the door. Through the thin wall, I heard the faint click of the guest room drawer again and the low hum of the printer. By Friday, the gossip had reached my family. My sister called, voice tight. She said, "Why is everyone talking about a video of you and your ex?" I said it wasn't a big deal. She said Evan must think otherwise. I told her to mind her own business. She said, "Maybe I am. Maybe you should start." When I got home that night, the atmosphere was different. Too still, like waiting for a storm. Evan was sitting on the couch, TV off, just staring at the dark screen. I dropped my bag and said, "You look like you're watching Ghosts." He said, "Sometimes silence plays reruns." I asked if he was planning to keep acting like this forever. He said, "No, forever's almost over." I froze. What does that mean? He didn't answer, just picked up his phone and typed something. A second later, I heard the faint buzz of my phone on the counter. He'd sent me a link, a local news article about social media reputation cases. The headline read, "Digital Defamation and Personal Evidence Laws." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, so now you're studying law because I danced with someone." He said, "I'm studying consequences." I told him he was being ridiculous, paranoid, obsessive. He said, "Maybe, but I'm also done arguing." Saturday morning, the air between us felt brittle. I tried to make breakfast like nothing was wrong. He didn't join me. I found him in the guest room, sorting papers into envelopes. I asked where he was going. He said, "Just errands." I said, "Where?" He said, "Downtown." I asked if he wanted me to come. He said, "No need." He left without another word. I watched from the balcony as he got into his car, the trunk already half full of boxes. He drove off slow, steady. I told myself he was doing donation runs or schoolwork, anything normal. I spent most of the day cleaning, which meant moving things around without purpose. When I opened the closet, I noticed some of his clothes were missing, just the formal ones, the kind you'd wear for meetings. I checked the drawer where he kept his watch. Empty. My chest tightened, but I told myself he was just staying with a friend for space. That evening, I poured myself wine and called Tara. I told her he was being secretive again. She said maybe he was bluffing. "Men love the drama of pretending they've got a plan," she said. I laughed. but it came out sharp. Then why does it feel like he actually does? Around 9, he came home. He looked calm, almost peaceful. I said, "So? Run your little errands?" He nodded. "All sorted." I asked, "What does that mean?" He said, "It means everything's in motion." I tried to joke, asked if he was running for office. He smiled faintly. Not my style. I followed him to the kitchen. "Evan, you can't just say cryptic things and expect me to sit here guessing." He said, "You already guess everything else." I said, "Stop acting like you're above this. You're not some saint." He said, "No, I'm just finished being the fool." I felt heat rise in my chest. "So what, you're leaving me?" He said, "No, I'm just letting you leave yourself." That made me angrier than anything else. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through the comments under the video, and shoved it toward him. "You see this? Nobody thinks it's a big deal. You're the only one turning it into a crisis." He looked at the screen, then at me. "They're laughing at you, not with you." I said, "You don't know that." He said, "I don't need to. I was there." He walked past me to the hall, paused and said quietly, "You've built an audience. I'm just building proof." Then he went into the guest room, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a long time, phone in my hand, screen dimming until it went black. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the faint whir of the ceiling fan. Later, when I finally lay down, I checked my phone again. A message from an unknown number blinked across the screen. File uploaded successfully. I didn't recognize it, but something about the words made my skin crawl. I turned off the light and stared at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. Every shadow felt like him, methodical, calm, and already 5 steps ahead. Sunday came dressed as calm, but it was the kind of calm that hides something underneath. I woke up early, earlier than Evan for once, except his side of the bed was cold again. The window was cracked open, the curtains lifting softly in the breeze. On the nightstand sat another folded note. "At your mother's, right? I'll meet you there. E." His handwriting was too neat for a man pretending to be fine. I stared at the note for a long time before getting up. My mother had planned a small family dinner that evening. Nothing special, just her excuse to check on us, without calling it that. I almost cancelled. Then I decided showing up together might shut everyone up. If he was meeting me there, maybe that meant he was ready to talk like a grown-up. By noon, I was pacing the apartment, watching the clock tick louder than usual. When he finally came home, he looked freshly showered, calm, clean lines. He asked if I was ready to go. No greeting, no smile. I said sure. The drive was silent. The hum of the tires filled the space between us. At one red light, I tried to start small talk, said something about the weather turning. He just nodded. My mother's house smelled like garlic and comfort. She met us at the door with her usual loud affection, hugging me first, then Evan. He froze a little, the way polite men do when they'd rather not be touched but don't want to seem rude. I caught it immediately. She didn't. "You two look lovely," she said, though we clearly didn't. June was already there, sitting at the table scrolling her phone. She barely glanced up when we walked in. "Oh," she said. "You came." Her tone was sharp, the kind meant to wound without breaking rules. We sat down, and the conversation stayed polite for exactly 7 minutes. My mother talked about her garden, about the neighbor's new dog, anything but the obvious tension hanging over the table. Evan answered every question directly, voice steady. When she asked how work was, he said, "Busy." When she asked about the house, he said, "Still standing." I tried to laugh it off, make jokes about him being the silent type. Nobody laughed. June sipped her wine and said, "Some silences say more than shouting." I told her not to start. She raised an eyebrow. "Start what?" I said, "Whatever performance this is." She put her phone down. "I'm not the one performing." My mother tried to change the subject, said something about dessert, but I couldn't stop myself. "You know," I said, forcing a smile. I think people take all this way too seriously. Evan just likes his peace and quiet. I respect that. He's not the jealous kind. Evan's fork paused mid-air. Jealous? He said softly. Is that what you call it? The room went still. June looked up, eyes narrowing. My mother said gently, maybe we should save the heavy talk for later. I waved her off. No, it's fine. He's just being dramatic. I turned to him. Tell them how you think I've done something terrible when all I did was walk home with someone. He didn't rise to it. He just said, you like telling stories. Tell this one too. The tone, quiet, almost bored, made me want to scream. I laughed instead. Oh, come on, are we really doing this here? He said, you picked the place, not me. My mother's hand touched my arm. Sweetheart, maybe later. I snapped. No, everyone already has opinions. Let's make it official. June's voice cut through the air. You embarrassed him. Online. In front of everyone. I turned to her. Oh, so you've joined his side now? She didn't even flinch. There are sides now. That's telling. Evan stood then, slow and measured. This isn't productive, he said. I rose too. No, what's not productive is you acting like a saint while quietly judging me. He met my eyes for the first time in days. You don't need me to judge you. You've got an audience for that. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. My mother broke it with a shaky laugh. Let's eat before the food gets cold. Dinner was a ritual of pretending after that. Forks clinked. No one spoke more than necessary. My stomach twisted with anger and humiliation. I felt like I'd been put on trial in my own family's house. After dessert, when we were about to leave, my mother asked him if he'd drive safely. He smiled politely. Always. In the car, I started before he could. You enjoyed that, didn't you? He looked out the window. Enjoyed what? Making me look like the villain. He said, I didn't make you anything. I stared at him, searching for some sign of emotion. Do you even care anymore? He said, I care enough to stop pretending. That line stung. I wanted to hit something. Instead, I folded my arms and said, fine, keep sulking. It's not a good look on you. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and slammed the door. I heard him in the kitchen, the sound of a mug set gently on the counter. Always gentle, always composed. That made me angrier than shouting ever could. I stayed in the room for a while, scrolling through messages I shouldn't have been reading. Mason had sent another one. You okay? Saw that video thread blowing up again. People can be cruel. I typed back, I'm fine. He's just acting strange. Mason replied, maybe he finally realized what he lost. I didn't answer. The message glowed on the screen, small and poisonous. Later that night, I came out to get water. Evan was sitting at the table again, laptop open, that same calm posture. I asked if he planned to ignore me forever. He said, not forever, just until it's finished. What's finished? I asked. He didn't look up. You'll see. I tried to peek at the screen, but he turned it slightly away. I saw just enough to notice the column headers, dates, names, and something labeled verification. Are you seriously still keeping a log? I asked. He said, someone has to remember accurately. You sound insane, I snapped. He said, insanity is repeating the same behavior and expecting trust. I threw my water bottle into the sink. The sound echoed, but he didn't flinch. You know what your problem is? I said. You can't handle a woman who doesn't beg. He said quietly, no, I can't handle one who mocks. For a second, we just stared at each other. Then he stood, rinsed his mug, and walked past me to the guest room again. The door clicked shut, that same careful sound, like punctuation, on the end of a sentence I didn't want to read. When I woke up the next morning, the apartment felt hollow. On the fridge, another note waited. Meeting, 9:20 downtown. Always downtown, always the same vague word, meeting. I tore it down and crumpled it, tossed it into the trash. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "He called me," she said. "Who?" I asked. "Evan. Said he wanted to make sure we knew he appreciated dinner." "That's it?" She hesitated. "He also asked for a copy of the receipt from when we paid for the rehearsal dinner years ago. Do you know why he'd need that?" My throat went dry. "No idea," I said quickly. She sighed. "I hope you two aren't doing something you'll regret." I ended the call before she could say more. By evening, I'd decided to invite some friends over. Distraction felt better than dread. Tara and a few co-workers showed up with wine. The laughter filled the apartment like air freshener, covering the smell of something rotten. They teased me about the viral posts, asked if I'd monetized my moment. I played along, tossing jokes, pretending it was all a harmless internet phase. Tara nudged me, whispered, "You sure he's okay with this?" I said, "He's fine. He's too busy sorting spreadsheets to notice." An hour later, Evan came home. The room fell quiet, the way people do when an uninvited truth walks in. He greeted everyone politely, grabbed a bottle of water, and disappeared into the guest room without a word. Tara looked at me. "He's scary when he's calm." I tried to laugh, but it came out brittle. "That's just how he decompresses." When everyone left, I stood in the hallway staring at the closed guest room door. I wanted to knock, to demand he come out and face me, but something held me back. That quiet hum again. Printer, computer, I couldn't tell which. It felt like the house itself was recording me. I poured myself another glass of wine, scrolled through the comments under the latest repost of the rooftop clip. Some stranger had written, "Imagine being the husband watching this." The comment had hundreds of likes. My chest tightened. I almost threw my phone, but instead I wrote back, "Imagine being married to someone who can't take a joke." I regretted it immediately. Before bed, I checked the living room. His laptop was gone. The surface of the table was perfectly clear, wiped down. Even the small plant we kept there was missing. The only thing left was a folded napkin. On it, in his tidy handwriting, "Properly handled. Timing soon." I stared at it until the letters blurred. Then I tore it up and flushed the pieces down the toilet like that could stop anything from coming. At 3 a.m, I woke to the soft sound of a drawer closing. The guest room door was open just a crack. Through it, I saw him standing by the window, light from his phone casting long shadows across the floor. He wasn't looking at the screen, just out at the street, expression unreadable. I whispered his name. He turned slightly, just enough for me to see his face. Calm, tired, finished. Then he said, almost kindly, "You should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." He turned off the light and the room went dark again. I lay awake until morning, waiting for the sound of the printer that didn't come. The silence was worse. It meant whatever he'd been doing was finally done. Monday started with rain, that soft, constant kind that makes the world look like it's underwater. Evan was already dressed when I came out of the bedroom. Suit jacket, polished shoes, the navy tie I bought him lying perfectly flat against his shirt. He looked sharp, too sharp for an ordinary day. I asked if he had another meeting. He said yes, same place as before. I asked what it was for. He said, "To keep things proper." That word again, proper. I hated it. It sounded like a wall. He poured himself coffee and asked if I needed anything from the store later. I told him I didn't need favors. I needed him to stop acting like a ghost in his own house. He said, "I'm not haunting you, Liora. I'm closing chapters." Then he grabbed his briefcase and left before I could reply. The quiet that followed felt bigger than the apartment. I spent the morning pacing, replaying every conversation we'd had since the party. Every calm word, every unfinished sentence. I wanted to text him, to make him react somehow, but I didn't know what to say that wouldn't make it worse. So I texted Tara instead. She replied almost instantly, "You sound obsessed. Let him breathe." I stared at her message, wondering when she'd turned into him. I typed back, He's the one hiding things. She left it on read. At noon, I decided to distract myself. I cleaned, though there wasn't much left to clean. Everything he touched was already arranged too perfectly. In the guest room, the desk was empty except for a single folder labeled Archive B. My hands hovered over it, then pulled back. If he wanted me to see what was inside, he would have left it open. On the living room table, my phone lit up with a call from my mother. She asked how things were going. I told her fine. She said she'd spoken to June, who said Evan seemed distant. I laughed it off. That's just his personality. My mother hesitated. Maybe you should try listening before defending. I ended the call. When Evan came home that evening, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch a show. He asked if I'd eaten. I said no. He said, "You should." I said, "You should stop pretending you care." He sighed quietly, the kind of sound that's more exhausting than angry. "You think caring and control are the same thing," he said. I turned down the volume. "You think control is love?" He didn't argue. He just loosened his tie and sat in the chair opposite me. The distance between us felt deliberate, measured. He looked at me and said, "We can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" I asked. "This, circling blame, pretending it's communication." I crossed my arms. "Oh, now you want to talk?" He nodded once. "I want to end the noise properly." I laughed because the alternative was crying. "Properly? You sound like a lawyer." He looked right through me. "I've had advice." I froze. "From who?" He didn't answer. My stomach twisted. "So that's what all the meetings are for? You're lawyering up?" He said nothing. I stood up, hands shaking. "You're seriously going to make this legal? Over a walk?" He looked almost sad. It was never just a walk. It was everything that came after. I started pacing. "You're unbelievable. You act calm because you think that makes you righteous. But silence doesn't make you innocent." He said, "No, but it keeps me sane." I stopped pacing. "So what, you're just done?" He leaned back in the chair. "I'm done trying to explain why respect matters. You decided it doesn't." "You're twisting it," I said. "You're trying to rewrite what happened so you can feel like the victim." He shook his head slightly. "You already wrote that story for both of us." The words hit harder than I expected. I turned away, blinked fast. "You can't just erase me like this," I said. He stood, walked to the window. "I'm not erasing you. I'm documenting truth." That line sounded rehearsed, like something from a script he'd been waiting to use. I wanted to throw something at him, to make him stop sounding so calm. Instead, I said, "You'll regret this." He turned around, expression unreadable. "Maybe, but at least I'll regret it properly." He went into the guest room again. The soft latch of the door closing was all I could hear. I stayed in the living room, every nerve buzzing. After a while, I grabbed my phone and called June. She didn't pick up. Then I texted her, "He's planning something. Can you just tell me if he said anything to you?" She didn't reply. At midnight, I heard the faint hum of the printer again, pages feeding through slowly, one after another. I got up and pressed my ear to the door. His voice was low, almost like he was on the phone. I couldn't hear words, just tone, measured, steady. When the printer stopped, silence dropped again. I went back to bed but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that folder, Archive B. The next morning, I decided to test him. When he left for work, I waited 5 minutes, then slipped into the guest room. The desk drawer wasn't locked anymore. Inside was a neat stack of envelopes, each one labeled utilities, joint account, lease copy, statements. Underneath them was a small black notebook. I opened it. Inside, lines of dates and short phrases. Photo posted, lunch cafe, family dinner, archive sent. At the bottom of the last page, meeting 11 Kaum, confirmed delivery. I felt my hands go cold. I shoved the notebook back and closed the drawer. That evening, I pretended nothing was wrong. I cooked his favorite dinner, Stir-fry, extra ginger. When he came home, I greeted him with a smile I didn't feel. He looked at the table, then at me, surprised. "This looks nice." "I thought we could start over," I said. He nodded politely, sat down, took one bite. "Thank you." I tried to keep the conversation light, asked about work, about his students, about anything. He answered, brief but polite. When I said maybe we should go somewhere next weekend, he said, "I'll be busy." "With what?" He didn't look up. "Finalizing things." My chest tightened. "You mean us?" He sighed. "You mean you." I slammed my fork down. "You're doing this to punish me." He shook his head. "No. Punishment is emotional. This is procedure." I stared at him, trying to find some sign that he was bluffing, but his face was unreadable, the same calm surface I'd seen for weeks. "Procedure," I repeated. "You make it sound like we're filing taxes." He said, "In a way we are. Sorting debts, credits, accountability." I felt the sting rise behind my eyes. "You sound like a stranger." He said softly, "Maybe that's because you treated me like one first." He stood, carried his plate to the sink, rinsed it clean, and left it upside down, his ritual. Then he turned toward me, hands on the counter. "I'm not angry, Liora. Not anymore. I'm just finished." I whispered, "You don't mean that." He looked at me with an expression that wasn't cruel, just final. "I'll handle it properly." That was the last thing he said before walking out of the kitchen. The next morning, the apartment felt colder, as if something invisible had shifted. The printer was gone. So was the folder. The guest room shelves were empty except for a single sticky note. "Meeting, confirm receipt." I called Tara and told her everything. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "If he's documenting things, you should be careful what you say." I snapped, "He's not building a case. He's being dramatic." She said, "People don't print things for drama." After we hung up, I sat on the couch and stared at the blank TV screen until the afternoon light faded. When he came home that night, he looked calmer than I'd ever seen him. He asked how my day was. I said, "You tell me. You seem to be tracking everything." He gave a small smile. "Not everything, just what matters." I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," he said. "That's the point." He walked past me to the guest room again. The sound of the lock clicking felt louder than before. I texted my mother. "He's planning something legal. Can he even do that without telling me?" She wrote back, "If it's about shared property, yes. Don't panic yet." But panic was all I could do. Around midnight, I went through his closet. Half his clothes were gone, replaced by hangers spaced evenly apart. I found his wedding band on the dresser, placed neatly inside a small dish. That was when I finally cried, the kind of quiet crying that doesn't even make sound, just breathing that hurts. When I woke up the next morning, the apartment smelled like rain again. He was in the kitchen, dressed, mug in hand. I said, "So this is it?" He looked up, that same unreadable calm in his eyes. "Almost." "Are you proud of yourself?" I asked. He set down his mug. "No, I'm just prepared." I felt something snap. "You're pathetic," I said. "You're hiding behind paperwork because you're too weak to fight." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "Maybe, but paperwork lasts longer than anger." He put on his coat and opened the door. "Where are you going now?" I asked. He said, "To finish it properly." Then he stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. The sound of it felt like the end of everything, even though I didn't yet understand what finish it meant. All I knew was that whatever he'd been preparing in silence was ready, and for the first time, I was the one left without words. Friday arrived like a held breath finally exhaled. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silver. I hadn't slept much all week. Every sound felt like a warning. Every quiet moment stretched thin with something I couldn't see but could almost hear forming in the background. Evan was already gone when I woke. His mug sat clean on the counter, a faint ring of water beneath it. as if he'd just lifted it away seconds before I came in. I tried to call him, but the line rang twice and went to voicemail. His recorded voice, steady, calm, the same as always, told me to leave a message. I didn't. There was nothing left to say that he'd want to hear. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. "Can you come by the courthouse plaza at noon? Evan said he'd meet you there. He said it's important." I stared at it for a long time. Courthouse. The word hit like a stone dropped into water. Small splash, deep echo. I typed back, "Why?" She didn't answer. I told myself it couldn't be what I thought. Maybe he wanted to talk in public so we wouldn't argue. Maybe it was about something ordinary. Bills, a misplaced form, something fixable. I dressed slowly, choosing a grey dress that looked serious but not sad, the kind of thing people wear when they still believe appearances can control outcomes. I did my makeup twice, trying to erase the tiredness under my eyes, and left just before noon. The plaza was busy when I arrived. Cars passing, pigeons scattering, people moving with that weekday urgency. The courthouse steps rose clean and white behind rows of trimmed hedges. My mother stood near the fountain, her coat buttoned tight despite the mild weather. She looked nervous, her hands twisting the strap of her purse. When she saw me, she gave a small, uncertain smile. "You look tired," she said. "I'm fine. Where's Evan?" She nodded toward the far side of the plaza. He was standing near the building's entrance, speaking to a man in a grey suit, papers in hand. The man nodded, took something from his briefcase, then stepped away. Evan turned, saw me, and for a moment neither of us moved. I forced a small laugh. "You brought an audience?" He didn't smile. He walked toward me slowly, deliberate as always, and stopped a few feet away. "Thank you for coming." I crossed my arms. "You made it sound like I had a choice." He looked past me at my mother. "I thought it would be easier if someone else was here." "Easier for what?" He exhaled softly, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Cream paper, thick, official. My stomach sank. "What is this?" I asked. He held it out. "Read it." I didn't take it right away, I just stared. "If this is about money, we can talk. You don't have to. It's not about money." I hesitated, then snatched it from his hand. The seal had already been broken. Inside was a stack of papers clipped neatly together. I scanned the top line, my eyes catching on words that blurred before they fully registered. Notice of termination of joint lease. Dissolution of cohabitation agreement. I blinked. Once. Twice. "You filed this?" He nodded. "Yesterday." My mother stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Evan, maybe this could have waited." He shook his head gently. "It's already filed. She deserves to see it officially." I looked at the signature at the bottom, his, clean and sure. Mine was missing. There was a line waiting for it. I laughed, sharp and dry. "You did this behind my back," he said quietly. "No. I did it after you turned it." "Turned what?" He gestured vaguely toward the world around us, the plaza, the air, maybe the mess of weeks behind us. "Everything." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. "You could have talked to me first." I tried. "You wanted a performance. You got one." I shook my head. "You think this makes you noble? You're just washing your hands of it, like it was paperwork instead of a life." He said, "You treated it like paperwork first, easy to sign, easy to erase." People were starting to slow down as they passed, their eyes flicking toward us, curiosity soft but growing. I hated that. I hated that even now I couldn't control the story. I said, "So this is it. You just hand me an envelope and walk away like some bureaucrat." He looked at me with that calm expression I'd grown to despise. "No, I hand you what you built. I just made it official." I wanted to tear the papers in half, to throw them at his chest and scream, but my mother's hand touched my arm. "Liora," she whispered, "don't do this here." I pulled away. "Why not?" He wants a public ending. Let's make it one. Evan's voice stayed level. No, I don't. I want peace. You'll get your peace when everyone forgets this ever happened. They won't, he said, and I won't either. But at least it'll be true now. The man in the grey suit returned then, holding another document. He spoke quietly to Evan, who nodded. Then the man turned to me. Ma'am, he said politely, you've been served. The phrase hit harder than anything else. Served, like punishment disguised as courtesy. He placed the second envelope in my hand. I didn't even open it. I could feel the weight of it, the law's version of closure. I looked at Evan. You really planned all this? He said, You planned it too, just differently. I laughed, though my throat burned. Congratulations. You win. Is that what this was about? He shook his head. No, this was about ending without lies. I stepped closer. You think you're better than me? No, he said softly. Just done pretending I'm worse. For a long moment we stood there, the city moving around us. My mother wiped her eyes quietly beside me. The man in the grey suit stepped back, waiting for a signal that never came. Evan finally said, You'll have time to read everything. It's all fair. You keep the furniture, the car, the savings split down the middle. I stared at him, confused. You're giving me half. It's not about taking, he said. It's about ending clean. That's generous, I spat. You should have added a thank you card. He didn't flinch. You're welcome. The restraint in his voice made me want to tear the air apart. You think this makes you righteous? That people will see you as the victim? He looked past me at something I couldn't see. I don't care how people see me anymore. I just care about being free of the noise. I said, You'll regret this silence. One day you'll wish I'd stayed. He met my eyes, calm and sure. You already stayed too long. The plaza felt louder suddenly, cars honking, the fountain splashing, someone laughing too far away. I felt like I was dissolving, breaking into pieces that couldn't hold shape anymore. My mother tried to take the envelope from my hand, but I clutched it tight. I didn't even know why. Maybe because it was the last physical thing he'd ever given me. He nodded once, like a polite farewell. You can sign and return it when you're ready. Or not. Either way, it's filed. Then he turned and walked away. No drama, no second glance. Just the steady sound of his footsteps fading against the pavement until they were swallowed by city noise. I wanted to call after him, to say something that would make him turn back, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was watch the space he left behind. My mother said softly, Let's go home. But the word home didn't feel real anymore. I sat down on the nearest bench, the envelope heavy in my lap. I opened it, though my hands were trembling. The top page was printed on heavy paper. Separation of assets and acknowledgement of personal conduct clause. Underneath, smaller text. Legal phrasing I couldn't process, except for one line that stood out like a wound. All digital materials provided voluntarily by Mr. Drew are verified and submitted as evidence. Digital materials. Evidence. I remembered the folder names, the USB, the printer hums in the night, the faint beep of his phone when something uploaded. He hadn't been bluffing. He'd been building his case the whole time, quiet and methodical. I flipped the page again, scanning for something to hold on to, and saw a final note attached with a paperclip. For reference, time-stamped records of social media, relevant public statements, and consented imagery. It hit me then. Every post, every comment, every harmless laugh I'd shared online was part of his proof. He didn't just leave me, he'd documented why. My mother put a hand on my shoulder. Liora, let's go, you're shaking. I nodded, but my voice didn't work. I looked toward the courthouse steps again, where he'd disappeared inside. The sunlight caught the glass doors, flashing briefly like a camera. For a second, it looked like everything around me was still being recorded, even now. I folded the papers back into the envelope and held it tight to my chest. The air felt heavy, like the city itself was waiting for me to speak. but there was nothing left to say that hadn't already been printed, signed, and sealed. Somewhere behind me, the clerk's window opened with a sharp sound, and I heard the echo of a stamp hitting paper, final and flat. That was the sound that ended us,